This is The Recap, a weekly reflection on the sermons of Fellowship Baptist Church in Mainville, Ohio, seeking to help you make Jesus essential in every aspect of your life. I'm your host this week, Brent Wilson, and I'm here with the preacher of this week's sermon, Ryan Land. Ryan, how are you?
Good. It's an out-of-body experience for me to not do the intro. It as strange, not strange, preaching doesn't feel strange, but it's like as different as preaching on a Sunday morning feels. There's so much dissonance right then in you saying that paragraph. It's like when I used to do theater and it's like, is that dude saying my lines?
Yeah.
It's like, well, that was so weird.
I feel like I said it like you said it.
I'm settling it. You did not. That's what really threw me off.
Okay.
You did not say it like I said it. That's what really threw me off. I was
Man.
like, that's not how you say this is the recap.
That's funny. Well, I'm hosting this week because Ryan brought the word Sunday, and so
brought the word.
So I'm hosting. So let me start off with a question. We're talking about just kind of like this new sort of unity and relationship inside the church, and because of the gospel, how that changes things. And so this is sort of kind of connected. It's kind of a leap, but
that's fine.
Just kind of thinking about community.
Mm-hmm.
What is your favorite community sort of experience? I was going to say game, but I wanted to make it broader than game. Like what's your favorite thing to do with people?
Like if I just had my choice.
You had your favorite group of people and...
that's easy.
Okay.
That's easy. And people are going to dog me for this.
Oh, I won't.
You won't, because you actually do this with me.
Okay.
But it's played Dungeons and Dragons.
That's
one of my favorite things to do. I think it's so fun.
Somebody is going to try to cancel us because we play Dungeons and Dragons.
It's like everything. There's a little bit of acting. There's storytelling. There's like board game elements.
There's dice.
It's like fantasy, like swords and magic. I love all that stuff. I love rules.
That's true.
I love to memorize rules. I love to, like when we were at the SBC and we were like arguing over a footnote, I was standing up and applauding. And there's a lot of that in D&D.
Yeah.
So it's like, that's up there for me.
Okay.
Like that's what we did for my bachelor party when I got married.
That's true.
Like, we played Dungeons and Dragons.
That's true.
So,
that's true.
What about you? What would you say? I feel like that's all you like to do is communal,
communal
activities.
Say, as a true 7 on the Enneagram,
you're like, I just want to do all of it.
I'd like just be with people and do something is my favorite thing. I would probably say like if I had my druthers and just could do whatever. I mean, D&D would be
druthers.
My druthers.
I don't even know what that is.
I think it's a Southern phrase. I don't know, but if I could do whatever, if I could do whatever I wanted, I mean, D&D would probably certainly way up there. But really, just whatever board game I'm into at the time would be way up there, or video game.
We've been playing some NCAA.
Yep,
recently.
Also, probably honestly, sitting around a campfire, maybe with a guitar.
Some s'mores.
With some, I'm not a big s'mores guy.
What?
Not a big s'mores guy.
That's surprising. I love a s'more.
But with some snacks, to be sure, and some just rigorous debate. Honestly, one of my favorite times.
Whoa.
Sit around a fire and talk, and to speak as men do.
The other thing I thought of was I love a sporting event as a group.
That's true.
So when we've been to Bengals games or we're about to go to a Reds game with the youth group, I like that stuff.
That's good. I do like that. So one of my favorite things of the year is the Super Bowl party. Don't even care who's in it.
Yeah.
The Panthers probably won't be in it. Bengals might be.
Cowboys might be.
But yeah, I love that. Usually if there's people and food involved, I'm in.
And an activity.
And an activity, I'm in.
Brent's in. That's so funny.
True 7.
Yeah, on the Enneagram.
Yeah.
For people. Did you say that earlier?
Enneagram?
Yeah. Okay, just to be clear.
All right.
People are like, what are you talking about? 7.
All right, so this was the last sermon in a short series we did called The Gospel Changes Everything. And
4 weeks? 4 weeks.
4 weeks. It was a 5th week because Jacob did a one-off in the middle of it. But kind of went into this series with this mindset of there's just been some things on my heart that I've kind of wanted to talk about and trying to figure out a series that really kind of helped me to talk about those things. And when I laid out the 4 topics, so it was like work, relationships, Christian worldview, and then just kind of how the gospel changes our culture amongst one another as believers. The 2 that I was really passionate about particularly was this Christian worldview and work, things I've been kind of thinking about for a few years now. And I've just not really had an outlet to talk about them. And summer, it's like, hey, I think these are things people need to know. Let's talk about them. But the reason I asked you to do this one is because this is something, it's on both of our hearts, but more particularly, it's something been a topic on your heart for the past few years.
Yeah.
And so before we dive into the content, tell me a little bit just about why this subject's been on your heart, what's inspired you, what's made you think about it, all those things.
Yeah. So I think it must have been at the Gospel Coalition Conference
2022?
2022? What is that? Gosh, I feel like it'd been earlier than that. I think it was there one in 2021? After COVID?
2 years in a row, maybe, possibly.
I don't know. So one of those years. And we went to a breakout session with two pastors from Nashville, Ray Ortland and Sam Alberry, who are both guys I like knew. Honestly, at that point, I probably knew Sam Alberry more.
Really?
Yeah, like just from his writing and stuff than I did Ray Ortland.
Yeah.
I liked Ray Ortland. I knew a little bit about Ray Ortland, but I wasn't like really into the number one thing I knew about Ray Ortland was at one point on his truck, I think he had a Black Lives Matter sticker and an NRA sticker.
Oh yeah, that's true.
And I was like, this guy is fascinating. And so it's like, I like that about him. And so it's like, this guy's not fitting in anybody's categories.
Yeah.
And so we went to them talk, and it was about I think it was maybe just called like gospel sanity or gospel.
You're Not Crazy?
Yeah. And it was like they were talking about a podcast they were about to do called You're Not Crazy, Gospel Sanity for Young Pastors. And I have my notebook from when we went to that breakout session, and it's like I think I wrote it down verbatim. like I used a quote from that breakout session in my sermon. Oh, okay. Like because I like remembered it, the Islands of Shalom and the Ocean of Rage. Like I remembered that from then, and so I don't know what it was, what I was feeling, or what I was exactly just like what in me was like needed or what was inflamed by that, but just this idea that, hey, if we really believe these things about Jesus, if we really believe this thing about salvation, if we really believe these things about the atonement, if we really believe these things about justification by faith alone, then that's not just like good news for our minds. That is it changes the way we think about everything that we do. And the scriptural, like basis of all of that, Paul all over the place. A lot of times people talk about Paul, and he's kind of like reformed bros like love Paul because he's like always like breaking down arguments and arguing against the Judaizers and the circumcision party and whatever, and it's like kind of dunking on them, and it's like, yeah, we love Paul, he's got harsh words, he's got great theology. But then you have these verses, where he's talking welcome one another as Christ has welcomed you, or outdo one another in showing honor, or he talks about this was from that same conference, different breakout, but talks about in I think it's in Philemon, he talks about sending someone back to Philemon he's writing to, and he calls him, he says, I'm sending you, and I can't remember his name, but he's like, who is my very heart. Oh yeah. He's like, this person is not just a brother to me, he's my very heart. Yeah. And so that felt like a piece of the kind of like the gospel puzzle that had been missing in my church experience, and kind of like my theological training, my discipleship. I had learned a lot of stuff in my head, and to see these two guys that were way smarter than me to be able to say, hey, we're gonna actually show you what this changes about your life. It's not just stuff to know in your head. Yeah. And so ever since then, it's like I've just been like, anything they release, anything they
eating it up.
It's like, and it really is like I want our church, I want my youth ministry, I want it to resemble what we believe. And it's like I don't want to be hypocritical. We think about this hypocrisy. It's like, well, you say don't have sex before you're married, and then you go have sex with your girlfriend or whatever. Like that's like we think about hypocrisy. So you say don't steal, and then you go steal or go cheat on your test or whatever. But it's like we say nothing we can do can get us salvation. But then what we do at church on Sunday is clean ourselves up, try to clean ourselves up to make it look like we've earned it.
Yeah.
It's like, even that is hypocritical. And so trying to create and cultivate like authentic gospel community, gospel culture as a result of what we believe about the gospel has just been really, really important to me.
I think there was no better picture, or what really kind of made me begin to think about these things is in Ray Orton's book, The Gospel. He has this picture where the choir loft is full of people, and there's a banner behind the people in the choir loft that says Jesus saves. But all the people in the choir loft are wearing KKK robes. And so he says they had the right doctrine, Jesus saves, on the banner, but they had the wrong culture. That doctrine didn't permeate down into their hearts and lives. And so I think that's really important. You know, one of the things you've talked about a lot from Ray and those guys is you talked about in your sermon, outdo one another in showing honor. And something that for some reason is hard for us. You know, it's easy in our culture,
especially men.
Yeah. You know, it seems easy for us to fight and tear each other down, and so hard,
and kind of like dog at each other. You know, kind of like pick on each other, and you know,
which can be good, fun, and loving, and all those things. But it's like when to give someone an encouragement, it's like pulling teeth. It's like this is so hard.
And not even in like and to be like, you know, not in this like you look good today or whatever, you losing weight, like this, like whatever, you know, that's kind of trite, but in like an honest way. And it's like, man, I see how you love your wife, and it's really encouraging to me. And it makes me want to love my wife better. And that's like you especially for men, I think, it's like you say something like that to someone, and you're like, are they gonna think I'm weird? Are they gonna think I'm like soft? Are they gonna think I'm like
soft, effeminate?
Something like that.
And so it's like, I think that's something, I mean, you've talked about, of like, we want to create a culture where that's normative. And not weird or effeminate or
where
whatever.
the like neutral state is one of building up, of showing honor. Instead, I think just like our neutral state is one of like sarcasm and know-it-all, kind of like figure it out. You know, it's like, I think that's just kind of everyone's neutral state. But we've like really normalized that, I think, just in America and in the culture. It's like, that's just how people talk to each other.
It's like, you know, talk about
maybe in the world that's how people talk to each other.
You talk about being islands of shalom in a culture or ocean of rage. It's like, we also want people to feel like when they come into the church that it's like they've been beat down all week. And now they come in here knowing they're just going to be lifted up. And Ray talks about even like how when you leave church, you should almost float out of the room.
Gospel wind in your sails.
That's good. That's good. Well, good. So that's, you know, when I plan this series, it's like, this one's going to be in here. Oh, I got to give this to Ryan.
Also, because I've preached about it like 3 or 4 times.
I know. So the next one won't be this. I promise.
Maybe it will be.
It's been good every time. So your kind of big idea was the gospel doesn't just save us from sin; it saves us for a new kind of community. And I think this idea is super important. And not even just about this content, because I think sometimes we get to the cross and we stop, and we don't realize that the cross is always a means to several different ends. It's kind of one big end that God's making all things new, but we can see that in these kind of different particulars, and you're pointing out one of those particulars here. But it's like the cross is a means by which God is achieving something else. It's not the end in itself. It's the means. And so you're here saying that the cross, the gospel, is the means by which God is creating a new sort of community.
Well, it's interesting you say like the cross, is because that's in Ephesians 2, that's the language Paul uses. Is he's talking about, you know, breaking down the divisions in his flesh, you know, breaking down the divisions by his blood. And so it's like Paul is directly relating this communal change to Jesus' work on the cross.
Absolutely. Okay, so you had 3 points. We'll talk about your first one. It says, the gospel saves us from comparison and provides security. Talk to me about saving us from comparison and providing security.
So this point kind of came from, this is not, I think, and this is really about the beginning of the verses we talked about in Ephesians. And so, but I think when you understand the gospel and your own salvation correctly, biblically, how Paul talks about it here in Ephesians 2:8, it leads you away from having to compare yourself and instead leads you to like security in your identity in Christ, in your union with Christ, which then frees you to be honest about your sin, be honest about your struggles, be honest about the things that are not going the way that you'd like them to, right? So it's like, for it is by grace you have been saved through faith, and this is not of yourselves, it is the gift of God, so that no one may boast, right? And so like, in short, Paul is saying, you did nothing.
Yeah.
All of this salvation is a gift from God.
Yeah.
It's like, you can do nothing to get here. And so I think I think there's very few people, very few Christians who think, I was good enough to come to Jesus, or I was good enough to get my salvation. Like, I don't think people think that, but I do think subconsciously sometimes we can think, we can look at other people who don't know Jesus and think, well, why can't they just get it together and figure it out? It's like, because they don't have the Holy Spirit. It's like, and you do. So like, you did just as little as they did. Right. And so I think understanding that is like, I think it feels at first scary because we want to be in control of everything. A line I didn't say in the sermon that I wanted to say in the sermon, it says, it is a gift of God. And I'd say, and it doesn't mention you having to accept the gift.
Yeah.
It's like, he gives it to you.
Right.
It's not like he gives it and some people are like, no, thanks. Right. And other people are like, yeah, bring it on. It's like, no, he gives it to you.
Right.
You get it. When he gives it, you get it.
Right.
So I think that could be scary because we want to be in control of that. I think even when we're just like, but I accepted the gift, that's just giving yourself 1% of control of your own salvation.
Credit. Sure.
And so then you can say, well, I accepted it, but this dummy over here didn't.
Yeah.
And I can compare myself to him.
Right.
But so then I think once you think about it in the context of this whole sort of church ecclesiological argument that Paul's making, you see like, oh, this isn't a scary thing, it's a freeing thing. Like, we can go live together in the church, live our lives with one another. Like 1 John says, walk in the light with one another, because like we all got here on the same basis.
Yeah, we're all in the same boat.
Yeah.
You asked a question, I think in youth group, maybe over a year ago. And it was something like, what is the scariest question you could ever be asked? Or the hardest question? Or
what's the biggest lie?
The biggest lie, that's what it was.
Yeah. What's the biggest lie people tell on Sunday morning?
And it's when someone asks, how are you doing?
And you say, I'm okay.
Yeah.
Or I'm fine.
Yeah.
Or I'm good.
Yeah.
Right? One of those things.
Yeah. And so it's like this mask we put on because we don't want people to see the sin, the messiness, or whatever. It's like, yo, this is all of us.
Yeah.
We can all stop pretending and realize that, we're all just in the mud.
Yeah.
It's like when we all pretend, like we can't help each other. And then we're also worried that other people might see behind the mask.
Yeah.
And then it's like, if they see behind the mask, I'll be exposed. I think one of the most helpful things I ever heard someone say was, we all want to be fully known and fully loved, and we're scared if we're fully known, we won't be fully loved. And what we understand in the gospel is that God fully knows us and fully loves us.
Yeah.
But what we want to experience that from other people.
Yeah. Which is what Paul is telling us to do when he says, welcome one another as Christ has welcomed you.
Yeah.
Is like, when you fully know, if you know all the baggage someone's carrying, to still welcome them. Yeah. Because that's exactly what Jesus did for you. But I also think, there's this sort of like self-protection measure, that it's like, we got to protect our reputation. We got to protect our, what people think of us. We got to protect our family's reputation.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, well, my kid can't act like that in Sunday school because then they'll know that stuff's messed up at church.
Which it's been interesting lately. Shout out to Connor, if you've met Connor at church. One of the things that I'm super envious of about Connor is, if you've known Connor, he's tattoos. He's got neck tattoos, right? He's got tattoos all over himself. And he'll tell you.
He shaves on his tattoo line.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, he does. But Connor, it's when you look at him, you can tell, this dude's had a past. And then he's open to tell you about it and talk about it. And so he's got no mask on. And it seems so freeing. And it's just like, hey, this is who I am. This is who I was. This is what God's done in my life. And here's where I am now. And it's just like, why can't we all don't have to have these crazy, hard, dark pasts to be like that. We can just expose whatever our past was. We all have one.
And honestly, in some ways, I think in our kind of evangelical Christian circles, we can like incentivize like, oh, this guy's got like a dramatic story. I'm not even just like referencing Connor. It's like, oh, we can really celebrate that. We can really, you know, be like, wow, look what a great work God's doing. But then it's like someone in our Sunday school class confesses that they're, you know, addicted to pornography, and we're kind of like, ugh, keep it to yourself, bro.
Oh yeah.
You know, it's like, so we'll incentivize kind of these big dramatic stories, but then it's like, you know, on stuff that may be closer to home to us, we're like, whoa.
And I think part of that problem too is like sometimes we're like, oh, I'm okay to talk about maybe who I was before Christ, but what about all the crappiness I've done since I've known him?
Yeah, or even now.
Even right now in this moment, right? And so it's like we can own that, and not be condemned, but loved on. Yeah. And I think one of the most powerful things is when you confess your sin to someone, and their immediate response to you is, remember Jesus. Like, you're forgiven.
Well, you know, James, it talks about confess your sin to one another, confess your sin, pray for one another, and then you will be healed. Right? And it's like, James is saying that's a very normative practice in the church. You know, it's like, hey, we're going to confess our sin and we're going to pray for one another. And that's where healing
Well, it's because like I've been holding this deep, dark secret in my life, and I've not been talking about it. And it's beating me up, and I'm feeling guilt and shame and all this stuff. And then when you finally let it go, it's like, oh, you mean everyone doesn't hate me and think I'm a scumbag because of this?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It's like, and that's the lie that we trick ourselves into, is that it's like, oh, I'll never recover from this. No one will ever look at me the same. No one will ever think of me the same. And then you do it, and if you're confessing your sin to a Christian who understands the gospel, then they're going to say, even though they may not understand whatever particular sin or particular hardship you're dealing with, they can say, I understand that's hard, or I understand that temptation, and it's like, but I love you. The Lord loves you. You can be secure in your identity in Christ because He has paid for all of it. Right. It's like, so let's walk together in our brokenness, looking to Jesus, looking to the cross, that we might look more like Him together. It's like, that's the response. And so this kind of truth at the beginning of Ephesians 2 is like, it's kind of like there's response to, hey, walk in vulnerability, walk in honesty, walk in exposure. But then also, it's like, when people do that, don't pull away, right?
Draw near.
For the people who are putting themselves out there, who are telling you what's going on, who are, you know, whatever, opening up to you, don't pull away, but draw near, minister to them, love them, carry them along with you. Ray Ortlund shows sometimes when he'll preach, he'll show this picture from Vietnam, and it's a guy who's been torn up by shrapnel, and he's bleeding, he can't walk, and he's got these two guys carrying him on either arm. So it's like he's in between the two guys, and he's like, that's what church is.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, there are some of us that are, I talked about the flower. There are some of us that are being crushed under our own weight, and we need people to come carry us. Yeah. And knowing that there's going to be a day when we're going to need someone to carry us.
I think about that Olympic runner. Olympics are going on right now.
Yeah.
Olympic runner goes and he like pulls his hamstring or whatever happens to him, and he starts limping. And it's like all the commentators, everybody watching is like feeling sorry for him, but they're just looking at him. And it's his dad who runs out there, and the security guards are trying to stop him. And he's like, no one's going to stop me from getting to my son, putting my arm around him and carrying him. It's like, that's church, like you're saying.
Yeah.
It's like, we don't just look and go, man, can you believe that happened to them? Can you believe they did that? Wow, look at that. I'll pray for you. No, we run up and no one gets in our way to put our arm around them.
Yeah.
So, all right, so that's one. Number two, you say the gospel saves us from alienation and provides reconciliation. So talk to me about that.
Yeah, so this is kind of building off that idea. It's like, so the gospel teaches us initially that Jesus has made reconciliation, has made peace, and has given us access to God. So this vertical relationship, right? He's restored the relationship between me and God, so you think up and down. But what Paul is saying right here in Ephesians is he's saying, hey, y'all are arguing amongst the Jews and the Gentiles and the Judaizers and the circumcision party. Y'all are arguing over this earthly category of circumcision, of being Jewish, of following the law. And he's like, and he says, you're misunderstanding the gospel. And he says, actually, in the cross, by his flesh, by his blood, you are being unified into a new man, right? It's like, so I think we can get confused on this and think, it's like, oh, well, we got to find a way to compromise with one another. We got to find a way to we got to be third wayers. We got to make everybody happy. We got to compromise everything. It's like, you like this carpet color, you like this carpet color. We'll do that in one room and this in the other room, whatever. That's a silly example, but it's like, no, what Paul is saying is that he's actually making a new kind. That's why I said in the main point, it's not just a new community. It's not just a different community. It's a new kind of community that has unity with one another, that's been reconciled to one another in a way that no other community on earth has ever been unified. And so, you think there's a big push right now for, DEI or DEIB.
Diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging.
You could read this text in a vacuum, maybe translate it into sort of modern English, and people will be like, well, that's DEI.
Yeah.
And it's like, there is a sense in which, like, Paul is arguing that, hey, you've been included in something that you do not have a place being included in. Like, you are a part of a household of God. You are part of you have a citizenship in heaven. And it's like, so there's room for all of y'all.
Yeah.
And so, the very specific thing in
heaven will be the most
Ephesians,
diverse place
you've ever been.
Yeah.
Every tribe, tongue, and nation, Revelation 21 says. So, it's like, get used to DEI in some sense.
And you'll have equity because you didn't do anything to get it.
Yeah.
It was given to you.
And you're being included. Everyone's being included on the same merit. So a little bit get used to DEI. And so it's like, but, thinking about that in terms of our church, we don't have a ton of, socioeconomic divide, right? Everyone in our church is relatively the same. There's no one in our church is homeless, is what I'm saying. We've got some racial diversity. Darcy was giving me a hard time because I said any gender. She was like, "Didn't you mean either gender?" And I was like, "Yeah, I did. I guess." I was just reusing the word any. But so then you think about, okay, what are the things we do divide on? Well, it's politics. It's whatever current event is happening right now. It's I totally ad-libbed talking about the Olympic opening ceremony thing. It's like, some people were like, this is blasphemy. God knocked out all the electricity in Paris because he was so mad about this. And other people were like, was this even the Last Supper? I'm confused if I'm supposed to be mad about this or not. And then some people were saying, you can't be mad about it. You're supposed to be mocked or whatever. It's like, so even Christians are starting to divide over, like, how are we supposed to respond to being made fun of or whatever? Like, I don't even know. It's like such a silly thing. And so, but we have all these, like, worldly categories. And instead of saying, like, this doesn't really have any gospel relevance, and so it's like, we can disagree on this and be unified together. So many times we're like, well, I can't be in a church that says you can be a Democrat. I can't be in a church that didn't honor the mask mandate or whatever. I can't X, Y, or Z, and we, like, separate ourselves off, or we say, I could never be in a church like this or in a church like that. And it's like, never do we make broad statements like that or get in fights online over, like, if a church is properly Trinitarian, or if a church has the correct theology of the atonement, or the correct theology of the divinity of Jesus, right? The things that should actually divide us. Instead, we're arguing over all these earthly categories that Paul is saying, it's like, these don't matter. These have been broken down. We can have unity in our diversity of opinion.
So it's like, we put our arms around each other around all of these worldly categories that would seek to divide us. Because actually what you're saying is, we are all sitting at the Lord's table, at Jesus' table together. And these things are trivial. They'll pass away. There are maybe a range of opinions, all these things. So that kind of leads to this natural question of, well, what are the things that is there anything that we should divide over?
Yeah. Well, you talk about in Starting Point, theological triage. So it's like this idea, there are first tier issues that it's like, we say, these are the issues that we cannot compromise on. These are the things that
you're not even in the household of faith.
These are marks of a Christian, right?
Yeah.
Jesus lived a perfect life, was born, like, think about the Apostles' Creed. Jesus was born of a virgin, lived a perfect life, died, rose again, and ascended to the right hand of the Father. Like, non-negotiables. Like, that's what Christians believe.
Yeah. So if you don't believe in the resurrection, we cannot have unity.
If you don't believe in the divinity of Jesus, it's like you're rejecting the gospel message. Yeah. And so it's like this is something I'm really interested in, like, thinking about church history. It's like, I think sometimes we can over intellectualize Christianity, but I also think sometimes we can under intellectualize it. And it's like, at its core, Christianity is a confession of faith. And so it's like, for 2,000 years, this is what Christians have confessed to be true. And so then in 1980, some people will be like, yeah, well, actually, I think Jesus was kind of just a ghost or whatever, and start believing that. It's like, hey, bro, we actually already had this fight in 80, not 1980. We had it 2,000 years ago. And we kicked all the people who believed that out.
Yeah.
Because we have a confession, and we believe, to be a Christian, you have to believe these things. And we're not like don't hear us say, like, we're the Pope deciding these things. Our church's first-tier issues are things that have been first-tier issues since the earliest Christian writings that we have access to. Yeah.
So a little bit of maybe a side tangent here. You talked about over intellectualizing or under the Christian faith. And so just kind of thinking through this a little bit, let's say somebody is a Jehovah's Witness. And we would say the doctrine of being a Jehovah's Witness would put you outside of Christianity because they do not believe that Jesus is God.
Yeah.
But maybe, tell me if you agree with this. I'm just kind of thinking about this. Maybe there's somebody who goes to a Jehovah's Witness church and they don't really understand the doctrine. And they've never really wrestled with whether Jesus is God. They just know that he died for their sins. They've never even thought about the question. Could that person in that church be saved even though they're in a heretical church?
It's an interesting question. It's like almost being saved from ignorance.
Well, yeah, it's like
because you've never considered the issue, you've never been able to be heretical on the issue.
Yeah, right.
And so it's like, part of me wants to say yes, like if you confess with your mouth, Jesus is Lord. So it's like they're not saying he's not Lord,
right? They're
just saying he's not God. So I don't know on that. It's like, obviously we would not in our church. If you were proclaiming that, we'd be like, hey, this is not the place for you. But it's like I think about Catholics, a similar question, right? Just because they believe in extra stuff, doesn't mean like I maybe this is bold, but it's like
I like bold.
Hot take alarm. Is justification by faith alone? Is not believing in that heretical?
The word heresy is tricky.
Like, point out the council. But is it outside the means? Is it outside the boundary of the faith?
No.
Yeah. So, and other people would come down differently. Some people would say yes. Some people in this room might say yes because they love Martin Luther and the Reformation so much.
Well, it's like for the Catholics, I always say that we're saved by justification by faith alone, not our belief in justification by faith alone.
Yeah. Our faith is not in justification by faith alone. Our faith is in Jesus.
Yeah. And the problem with the Jehovah's Witness is they have a different Jesus because he's not God.
Yeah.
But if maybe that person's in the church and they have not realized that and they've not wrestled with the question whatsoever. Because it's like we could meet somebody, share Jesus with them, go through the gospel, and like not really emphasize or hit the point that he's God, right? They come to faith, and like maybe they'll get that down the road, hopefully. Yeah. But they didn't consider it when they came to faith. We'd still say they're saved.
Yeah. Well, it's like so. I kind of used the example of the thief on the cross.
Yeah.
It's like Alistair Begg tells this great, sermon illustration, great story about
how steal it so
he's like, I can't wait to meet that guy because it's like, he showed up and the angels that are letting people in are like, now how did you get here? And it's like, and he's like, don't know, couldn't tell you, and they're like, all right, but like, what can you tell us about, like the doctrine of justification by faith alone? He's like, never heard of it. Don't know. It's like, all right, but what about the doctrine of the inerrancy of Scripture? He's like, what are you talking about? It's like. And then he says, by what means did you get here? And he says, the man on the middle cross said I could come.
Come on.
And so it's like, on some level, it's like you don't have to have a holistic understanding of everything in the faith.
Yeah.
To be considered part of the family of God.
Yeah.
That guy certainly didn't.
Tell me about the Trinity. What? What's that?
The what? I never heard.
Yeah.
Like the girl from the Matrix? What are you talking about?
There's a sense in which if you deny those things on earth,
yeah,
that shows you, at least outside of the faith for that moment. But ignorance of those things, maybe there's some wiggle room.
Yeah.
Because you're not denying the divinity of Jesus. You just don't even understand the category.
Yeah. I certainly think that could be the case.
Yeah.
Complicated question.
Complicated. Yeah. So anyways.
Have fun talking about that at the dinner table.
So the gospel saves us from alienation, provides reconciliation.
Well, the other thing I want to say about the second point is we actually think, we as a church have decided, we think this point is so important that we say it every week.
Oh, and our church particularly. Yeah.
It's we say every week, Nathan says every week, because we have peace with God, we can have peace with each other. And that actually is rooted in the ancient church tradition, right?
They would have the peace.
They would have a time of confession, and then they would have the passing of the peace, right? So they would confess their sins, they'd be cleansed of their sins, and then they would pass those. Now we have peace with God, now let's go make peace with one another.
Yeah.
And so my challenge to people listening is I'm an extrovert by nature. I love talking to people. And so the greeting time in a church is I love it. It could be 15 minutes. And I was because I want to talk to everybody and I don't ever get a chance to talk to hardly anyone. And so, but there's these people that are oh, it makes me uncomfortable.
Church growth people tell you not to do this.
Yeah. But church history people would tell you it's one of the most important things because of this versus like this. It's we're not just here to intake something like the Elevation worship tour. They don't have passing the peace, right? It's because they're not actually interested in you growing together. They're interested in you showing up.
Yeah.
It's we're not interested in you showing up. We're interested in you belonging.
Yeah.
Right. Which we're going to talk about here in a second. And so it's to belong, you got to go. You got to talk to people. You got to mingle. And not just talk to them. It's it's the passing of the peace. It's if you in that moment have sinned against someone and you, there's a fly in here. It's like that episode of Breaking Bad where there's a fly in the lab. It's driving me nuts. I don't even remember what I was saying.
Passing the peace.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's so you've sinned against someone and you've confessed that sin. It is now not your job to be hey, good morning. Hey, good morning. It's hey, I was so upset this morning. I woke up late. I was running behind. My kids were frustrating me, and I spoke unkindly to you. Will you forgive me?
Yeah.
So we can have peace.
Yeah. And that's happened in that time in our church. Yeah. There have been people that have gone to each other in that time.
It's that, and that's what it's for.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying you can only do that, but it is for that, and it is for us being joined together, growing together.
Yeah.
It's not just for good morning.
So I interned at a church.
Good morning.
When I was in college that did this, but it was about 10 minutes.
Come on.
And it was awesome.
You'd have to preach shorter, but I'm here for it. People are listening right now and they're I will leave our church.
They're please don't do that. I'm getting an email right now.
If
don't
the
do
greeting time is 10 minutes long.
Yeah. All right, so
it's because the last thing I'll say about the passing of the peace. It's because we think it's a social time, but it's not a social time. It's I guess it is in a sense, but it's we think of it as where you never have awkwardness, when you go to home for Thanksgiving,
right?
There's not this awkward what do I say to these people?
Yeah.
It's this is interesting. This is your family.
It's interesting. It's possible that there are some introverts in our church that time's awkward for. But mostly it's awkward for guests.
Yeah.
Right? Who don't really belong to our body. Not that they're excluded, but they don't belong quite yet.
Yeah.
They're seeking belonging.
And what we get to do is show them a picture of what our new kind of
we are
community
inviting
looks
you
like.
into this.
So I used to on the live stream, they used to go to a slide during the greeting time. And right after COVID, I told some people up in the tech booth, I was no. I was put the camera on the people in the room talking and just pan.
This is what you're missing.
Show the people what they're missing.
Show the people what they want.
So I was I want them to see that what they have at home is
screen.
less than what we have in person.
Yeah, that's good.
All right, we can move on now.
Okay. So third, the gospel saves us from isolation and provides a place to belong. Talking about that.
Yeah. So the ending of this, Paul is, this whole thing is like, here's the gospel. Here's why you guys got to quit being ticked at each other. You guys got to have unity. And then he says, and here's why. He gives you the why. And it's because y'all aren't just hanging out together. Y'all actually aren't even just people who believe all the same things. He's like, you have a purpose as a group. Jesus is making this new kind of community to be built up, to be joined together, to be grown into a holy temple of the Lord, where the Lord can dwell.
Yeah.
And so I talked about the Texas Standard Version.
Yeah.
And I talked about 1 Corinthians 3:16, where it's like, and when I say it's like, it translates y'all, it's like in the Greek, you can tell between, in English, when you say, hey, you, or hey, you, it's like, that could be singular or plural.
You gotta look at context.
But in Greek, you can look at the word itself and know if it is
because there are different endings.
If it's second person singular, if it's talking to a singular person,
Yeah.
you, Simon Peter, I say unto you,
Right.
Or if it's plural, right? And so
you all.
the Holy Spirit dwells in you all. Don't you know you all are the Lord's temple?
Right.
And so that's how we know. It's like, I'm not just guessing from the context. The word itself is you all, is y'all. And so that's the purpose by which we're being gathered, we're being united, is not just for fun, is not just for it's not even just for all these things. It's not just for accountability. It's not just for beauty. It's not just for building each other up or holding each other accountable, whatever. It's not for those things. Those are byproducts because we are being built into a temple of the Lord in which he dwells. I said this line, it's like Jesus democratized the Spirit of God.
Yeah.
Like it used to be in one place, and then it was in Jesus, right? He was walking with us, and then he ascends, and the Holy Spirit comes down at Pentecost, and it's now in all of us, right? But in this sense, not individually, collectively.
Yeah.
And so to underemphasize the church is to miss that is where the Lord dwells. And I don't mean in this building. I don't mean in any church building.
But it's a sense in which it's like we're all temples of the Holy Spirit, but the more temples you get together,
his power grows. So let's make one giant megachurch like Voltron.
That's right.
No, I don't. The mechanics of it, actually, I don't know how it works, right?
But there's something to it.
Yeah.
As we gather together,
Yeah. And
God
I don't
is
think
a
it's about
particular.
number.
No. But
Yeah.
as Christians get together,
Yeah, we're two or more.
that's right. I gather, man. Do church discipline.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. No, I was trying to set you up to
Yeah.
correct a verse.
But
taken out of
as
context.
we gather together, there's something special going on.
Yeah, and it's like there's something unique about the gathering of God's people.
Right.
It's like that's why the author of Hebrews says, "Don't forsake the gathering."
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily mean the Sunday morning worship service, because not every church has a Sunday morning. Christians in China don't have Sunday morning worship services every week.
Yeah, they get together when they can.
Yeah, it's like, so in that gathering,
Yeah.
it's like the Spirit is, the Lord's presence is dwelling among them, is dwelling among us in a particular way that it's not on our own.
Yeah.
And so then the other side of that is, we get to be part of something bigger than ourselves. So many teenagers now are just despondent because they think all they get told in school is like, go get your degree, go get a job, go get a family, and then everything will be great. It's like, that sounds like drudgery, because it is.
Yeah.
And it's like, life is actually meaningless if that's all there is to it. But to find something bigger than ourselves.
Yeah.
And that's why people get involved in like community stuff, or that's why that's why people are nurses and firefighters and police officers, like, because there's this bigger narrative they want to put. Hey, I want to help people. I want to heal people. I want to restore people. I want to enforce justice. I want to help people. It's this higher calling, right? This term, like career, is kind of like a higher calling. It's like the thing you're called to. It's like, but we get in the gospel a cosmic calling, right? Like we have a purpose that spans all of human history, And so the gospel invites us into that and gives us purpose. We don't have to be alone. We got all these people on the same mission as us.
Yeah, no, that's good. So one line you said in the sermon was, the Bible never mentions going to church, only belonging to the church. I thought it was really good.
Yeah.
Church isn't necessarily something we go to, it's something we belong to.
Yeah. And that has a lot of implications, right? Like to belong to a people, it's like, that means they have authority over you. That means they have.
That means they know you.
They know you. That means they can hold you accountable. They can confront you. They can. It's to belong to something is you talk about. It's like I don't belong to the YMCA. Like I pay them and I get to go. I get access to it. But like if someone came up to me at the Y and was like, "Hey, you can't use that machine right now" or whatever, I'd be like, "Bro, I
paid for it.
I paid to get in here." It's like you can't use that locker. I was like, yes, I can. It's like I paid to be here. It's like go to Costco or whatever. You pay to get in there. And so it's like, but it's not pay to play at the church. And so it's like we can come along and say like, hey, you're acting this way, and you're saying these things are true, and you're acting contrary to them. It's like we gotta do something. We gotta walk together to repair that, to restore that. And we can that's a place we can only do that in the church, because sometimes what people do is that will happen to them and they'll say, well, I'm just never coming back. And they'll just throw their hands up and they'll say, well, I'm done with this whole church thing, or I'm done with I'm done with this church. And it's like what you're saying when you react that way is like, I actually don't belong to you. I belong to myself. And so that's a weighty thing. That's an important thing that can be wielded really poorly, but it's like a responsibility we all have to take up. That's like we belong to each other. We don't just go to fellowship every week,
right?
Park in the parking lot, walk in.
Yeah, it's
walk
not
out.
Fast food Christianity where I go in to get my Jesus on and leave.
Yeah, take in that's what I was talking about at the beginning of the sermon, the individualized faith. I'm going to take in the sermon.
Man, I just need to go get me some worship.
Yeah,
people talk like that.
Here's another thing.
Missing the point.
The individualized faith thing that kind of drives me nuts as someone who's married to a children's minister. Church is not for filling up your cup. I think a lot of times people are like, well, I can't serve in kids during the service because I just need my cup filled up. You're like, you don't think these kids need their cups filled up with gospel knowledge? You know Jesus. They don't.
Yeah. But I might even say that, though, serving the kids does fill your cup up.
Well, it should if you have a gospel mindset about it, if you think about it in the proper light. And so it's like, that's another way we've just individualized the worship experience. Like, it's for me. It's to fill me up. It's like, that's not what it's for. That can happen, and that does happen. That's not what it's for. It's not for you. Was it you that told the story? Like someone's like, I didn't really like that worship song. It's like, hey, it's okay, man. It wasn't for you.
I think that might have been Jacob.
No, I don't know. That's so funny.
Yeah.
It's so true. It's like, I didn't really like that song. It's like, hey, it's all right, man. We're singing it to you.
It's good. That's good.
So I think there's so many ways we can see church, the activities of church, our D groups, our Sunday school classes, is like for us.
Yeah.
And in one sense they are, right, for our discipleship, for our good, but ultimately they're for God, right? And we're giving that time to God. We're belonging to the people of God for God's purposes.
Right. No, that's good. You also said, and I think it was in this third point, but I can't remember, when we divide ourselves, we are attempting to undo the work of Christ.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was in the second point.
And you said that, and I was like, oh, man, that's deep.
Yeah, I didn't know if it was necessarily true or not, so I didn't want to put it up on a slide to immortalize it. It just felt harsh, and I didn't want it to be harsh.
Yeah.
But it's like what Paul is saying is if the cross is by the means we have unity, and then we divide ourselves, what we're saying is, well, hey, actually the cross doesn't matter that much.
Yeah. Or it didn't work.
Or it's like, I like the part where it paid for my sins, but I don't like the part where it made me had to agree with someone or love someone that I don't like.
Yeah, it's like in this individualized faith where I can hold all of my opinions about all the things that I care about, and I can come in here and when you don't like them, I can just berate you and tear you down, and then you leave, and I can keep having my church experience the way that I want to have my church experience and have my opinions, and no one can come at me. And it's like, that's not you belonging and caring and being built into a community. That is you just wanting to be you, and everyone else to affirm you or get out of your way, and that is the antithesis of Christianity. And so the cross, to bring this kind of full circle, the gospel changes that to be. The gospel is building us to be a new community. We were two people, now we're one. And so I love in Ephesians where it talks about how there was Jew and Greek, there was slave and free, there was barbarian and Scythian. There are all these things that divided you, different people, whatever. But now there's one new man. And
it's better than any of the old ones.
Oh yeah. And you kind of mentioned this a little bit, but it's like there was Democrats and Republicans. Now there's one new thing. There was the left and the right. Now there's one
it's
new
like
thing.
the John Chrysostom quote I said. It's like putting melting down a statue of lead and a statue of silver together, and out comes a statue of gold. Right. And it's like we're actually putting these two less valuable things together, and somehow by God's grace, a greater thing is being. It's like subtraction that somehow results in addition, right? It's like we're putting two worse things together, and we actually get something better out of it. It's like, so we put our Republicans, we put our Democrats, we put them together in a church, and actually what comes out are Christians under the lordship of Christ, which is way better than Republicans or Democrats, or independents, whatever, or apolitical,
or the Green Party, whatever.
I'm not political. The Green Party, the American Solidarity Party, the Whigs.
No, bring back the Whigs. I don't even know what they believe.
The Federalists.
I'm here for them.
Let's bring back the Anti-Federalists. I don't even know who was an Anti-Federalist, but it's a cool name, I think.
Yeah, that's good. Well, anything else?
That's all I have. I hope it was encouraging to you.
Well, it was encouraging to me.
Well, thanks.
It was great. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us for the recap. We hope this conversation has encouraged you to keep striving to make Jesus essential in every aspect of your life. If you aren't a part of a church family, we'd love to meet you on a Sunday morning. We gather for worship at 10:30 a.m. For more information, you can go to myfellowship.church. Be blessed.